I'm really excited to welcome to the stage MoMA film curator Sophie Cavoulacos and the award-winning filmmaker, best known for Crazy Heart, Black Mass, and now Springsteen Deliver Me From Nowhere, writer-director Scott Cooper. Please join me in giving them a warm welcome.
Thank you guys for coming out. The movie's been in theaters for a couple of months now, so thank you.
Thank you so much, Scott, for being with us. We've been lucky to have you actually on both coasts, New York and LA, to speak about this epic film, epic achievement, certainly. As Claudia mentioned, your first feature, it was a music film. Since then, your career has been quite polymathic, really making all kinds of movies. And I want to start by asking, what kind of brought you back to music, in film, and kind of what brought you to Nebraska, with the kind of impetus of the project?
Yeah, well, music before film was my first love, which is my father, to whom I've dedicated the film, and who introduced me to my early musical tastes. Introduced me to classical country, where Crazy Heart was born out of, jazz, opera, classical music. And my introduction to Bruce Springsteen was Nebraska. And it came to me as a late teenager, and it kind of came at the right time. Disillusioned, not quite sure of your place in the world, what your future looked like, and I just, for some reason, really connected to his music, his characters, how spare it was, and I couldn't quite articulate it at 18 or 19 years old why I liked it so much, but it was something that I would always return to, that album, Nebraska. And even when I was writing subsequent films to Crazy Heart, Out of the Furnace, Black Mass, Hostiles, I would listen to that record. And then I read Warren Zanes' wonderful book on the making of Nebraska, Deliver Me From Nowhere. And simultaneously, the producers of the movie reached out to me via email and said, Scott, are you familiar with Bruce Springsteen's Nebraska? And I said, yes, I am, and it's one of my favorite records. Next thing you know, I'm in New Jersey with Bruce, Jon Landau, his manager, Warren Zanes, the author. And we had a day in New Jersey that led to the movie, and one that I'll never forget, because I spoke to Bruce just yesterday, and it used to be that Bruce has seen the movie 13 times. Now it's 15.
Wow. But one important thing to point out for maybe folks who don't know is that Springsteen kind of famously rejected movie adaptations, of his life, other than documentaries maybe, for years and years and years, and that is until you came around with your project. What was it in that day that kind of, that made this turn into something else?
Yeah, as Bruce explained it to me, the first producers who approached him in 1985 or 86 was Jerry Bruckheimer and Don Simpson. And they wanted to make a very different film than this. They wanted to make the Born in the USA story, something that of course at that time was in vogue. And Bruce has been asked to make that story, Born to Run, Darkness at the Edge of Town, many, many times. And no one had ever approached him about making Nebraska, which now, if you look, I suppose, at how the movie did at the box office, it makes sense. But he loves the film. I love it. It means so very much to Bruce. I think it was because if you read Bruce's autobiography, Born to Run, all of the chapters are very lengthy, except for the chapter on the making of Nebraska, which is 1 page, maybe 1.5. And because it was such an incredibly painful time, he said to me, Scott, you're the very first person who has asked if they could make this particular chapter of my life. He said, and I think it's probably the most cinematic chapter. He said, the most painful. He said, but it's one that I want to explore again, because he said it really shaped from that point forward who I was as a musician, and really everything that came before that. Even though it's a very short time, as you've just seen in his life, 6 months or so. I think if you really understand who Bruce Springsteen is, and you understand where Nebraska fits in his discography, that it really makes sense that what came before and certainly what came after really pivoted at this most pivotal juncture in his life. So it was a very quick yes. It's not a very Warren's book is not a cinematic book because it largely takes place in one room, right? And he's writing alone. So it's really about how do you make what's unspoken known to the audience. Movies are propulsive, and there's conflict, all the sort of things that you didn't really have in A Man in a Bedroom. But in the end, I opened the aperture a bit, as you've seen. Once I really explored Bruce's childhood trauma, his mental illness, the fact that he was at his personal low, but his creative best, because he is writing what he and I think is and many think is his best album, Nebraska, but also simultaneously writing these anthemics that become Born in the USA. So it's a pretty remarkable output in just a few days' time.
And you managed to dig deep into that without making anything that looks like a classical biopic. Certainly playing
that also appealed to Bruce.
Yeah.
Quite honestly, he's not a fan of music films, and now that I've gotten to know him incredibly well, I suppose a lot of his musician friends aren't. He feels that they follow a certain narrative, the rags to riches and the hit songs and the jukebox spectacle. And those guys just don't ever they don't connect with those films. They feel there's a sense of artifice. So I think that really appealed to him as well, because it's really a psychological drama about the art of creation, with just happens to be Bruce Springsteen and some music.
So you get the green light or concept from the boss himself, and then what happens? How do you, did you ever imagine that he would be as involved in the project as he was?
Because he was touring at the same time. But even though I used Warren's book as the seed, and I was reading Bruce's Born to Run, it wasn't until I really was able to open the film up and understand it until I spent time with Bruce. And I honestly, I thought he would just say, Scott, go off and write it and make the film, and I'll see you at the premiere. But it was just the opposite, because once I sent him my first draft, which he really loved, and I said, but Bruce, I feel like I can dig much deeper. I said, unfortunately, to do that, I think I'm going to have to come on tour with you, which I did. Which I have to say, if you've ever seen Bruce in Barcelona in front of 100,000 people,
sounds pretty nice.
My God, it's incredible. So he opened up to me, and there are many things in the film that he's never spoken about. And I really wanted to understand his childhood trauma. I wanted to understand how important Jon Landau was and is to him. The courage that it takes to see how honest you can be in your work, all those sort of things. And I couldn't get that. I couldn't understand Bruce's state of mind unless I spent time with him. The few times that you see in the movie when he's he's staring into the abyss and he's experiencing suicide ideation. I mean, those are the sort of things that most people don't know about Bruce Springsteen. But unless I was able to hear it from him, I couldn't quite access it properly. And then he came to set, and he came the first day, and he was like, oh my God, this is so much fun. And then he would go off and do a show, let's say in Montreal. And he, Bruce plays for 3.5 or 4 hours. Let's say he finishes by 11:30 or midnight. Then he flies home to New Jersey, and he's on the set by 9 a.m. I mean, it was kind of remarkable. Yeah. And a real gift for me to be able to have him there in the moment, in situ, to find out, what's your state of mind when you've just arrived in Los Angeles and you're in a house that reminds you of the house in Colts Neck, and it's cold and it's uninviting. It's the first house that you own, and you're staring into the abyss. And when you call Jon Landau, tell me about that conversation. Yeah, those sort of things. Or when you're driving down the road in Colts Neck at 94 miles an hour, tell me what's going through your mind. And he told me.
So when does Jeremy Allen White come into the mix? Is he also part of this kind of relationship with Bruce, or is it kind of a transformation that a different kind of transformation for him as an actor?
Not early on, but I did have Jeremy in mind, because as I was looking at images from Bruce in 81 and 82, they bear a very strong resemblance, apart from Jeremy has blue eyes and Bruce brown. Bone structure, same kind of working class physicality. I knew that Jeremy could play all of the moments, nonverbal moments, to convey Bruce's pain and trauma. I did not know that he would sing as well as he did. And he went through the very humbling process of vocal lessons, guitar lessons, harmonica lessons, movement. And I said to both Bruce and Jeremy, I said, listen, this is not about imitation or mimicry. This is really just about Bruce's emotional truth and his essence. And I don't want for people to feel like this is cosplay, because, unfortunately, Bruce had seen that. I've seen that. We don't particularly love that. And we just wanted to capture Bruce's spirit. And, who better to say that he has other than both Bruce and Jon Landau, right? Or Stevie Van Sant, whom I just saw in New York, who said to me, Scott, I've stood to the left of that man for 50 years. He said, I don't think people realize the job that Jeremy has done in capturing Bruce, not only singing, but just in terms of his physicality and the way he moves through the world, which I shared with Jeremy. It was such a compliment. Not
just to look the part, to sound the part, but I mean, it's. Did you always know that you would use his voice? I mean, it's
no.
It's so much part of that kind of. I mean, the story is a story of like a search of an authentic sound.
Yes.
But I can't imagine the kind of technical feat.
Yes. Well, because when you're singing "Born to Run" in front of 28,000 people in Cincinnati, that's one thing. Mm-hmm. Or Born in the USA for the very first time, and the Power Station. Those are two incredibly hard songs to sing. But it's the Nebraska songs when there's no place to hide behind. Those are much harder. Mm-hmm. It wasn't until we started rehearsing. I mean, quite honestly, I thought I would do what Rami Malek did and many other people, which is to say they lip sync. Mm-hmm. And you hear Freddie Mercury. Mm-hmm. But after we recorded Jeremy first singing Nebraska, before we got to Born in the USA and Born to Run, I said to Bruce, I said, I really think this is a more interesting take. He doesn't sound just like you. You can feel the warm tones of Jeremy's voice. Mm-hmm. I said, but it feels more personal. And if I'm making a film about America's most authentic artist, it feels to me like he should attempt to sing. And then Bruce listened to them, and he was like, is that Jeremy or is that me? I couldn't believe it. And even his kids who came when we were shooting said, is that Dad? I think it's kind of shocking.
Yeah.
I mean, you can really, if you listen very closely, you can tell the difference. But Jeremy, I think, did a really wonderful job for a kid who had never played guitar before, who's more prone to listen to hip hop than Bruce Springsteen. I mean, it's kind of shocking.
And just to say the generosity on Bruce's part to be open to this kind of interpretation.
Yes.
And I do want to give a shout out to your sound team, which was recognized by the Oscars, shortlisted for the sound category, very well deserved.
Yes, thank you. Well, those guys are.
Yeah.
They are the gold standard. Paul Massey and Dave Giamarco, Jason Reuter. I mean, they really are just the very best when it comes to recreating this. And when we were performing in the Stone Pony with the Greta Van Fleet Band, backing Bruce, I really wanted that to be live, which, you're kind of on a high wire when you do that. Mm-hmm. But they were able to mic that room in such a way to make it feel like, for those people who've been to the Stone Pony, that you're really in the Stone Pony. And then really just trying to recreate the sound, the imperfect sound that Bruce was striving for. Mm-hmm. so the casual fan would understand this is not what Bruce wants, this distortion, or it's too clean. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have, because Bruce, as you see in the film, he recorded on a 4-track recorder. He ran it through an echoplex that gives it this kind of short echo, and then he mixed down on a boombox that was flooded and came back to life, that played it too slowly. So all of these sort of things give it the sound that Bruce could not recreate when he went to Power Station. Mm-hmm. And then that was Paul Massey's job, was to recreate that so the audience could tell the difference, which I hope that you could. But those guys are geniuses.
So you talk about kind of feeling and essence over mimicry. That seems to be the kind of like the core of the film as a kind of process and vision. How did that play out for other parts of the process, like production, locations? I heard there was even articles of clothing borrowed from from Bruce's wardrobe. Like, what was, how do you kind of create that world?
Well, thankfully, we were able to recreate all these kind of iconic places that made Bruce who he was in Asbury Park. Stone Pony, the Carousel, the Power Station is still there, where Bruce recorded many of his records in New York City, and where he, for the very first time, electrified Born in the USA, which you see in the movie, and then shooting in Freehold, New Jersey. Bruce is someone who has kept everything he's ever owned since 1973, and it's all in an archive. And he gave us free rein. So you'll see many articles of clothing, many props. The notebooks that you see in the movie are Bruce's. He gave Jeremy the guitar, the J200 that he plays. The Camaro that he bought is the exact replica of the one that he had. In fact, Bruce bought that one from the production.
To add to the collection.
Yes. Yeah. So I think that's why he came so often, and why he's now seen the movie 15 times, is because he's reliving such a painful time, which is incredibly therapeutic for Bruce. But I don't know that the movie would have had the same lifeblood that it has without his participation and his giving me all of these sort of props and clothes and images. I mean, when I chose to shoot the movie in black and white, I did it for a couple of reasons. Because when I said to Bruce, "Tell me about your childhood," he said, "Well, I only really remember that time in black and white." He said, "That's why Nebraska, the cover is in black and white. That's why the liner notes are in black and white." So, of course, it just made sense to shoot those moments in black and white, because that's how Bruce remembered them. And, it's funny. He called me, like I said, he called me yesterday, and I have to tell you, to have Bruce Springsteen call you, or he doesn't call, he FaceTimes. To FaceTime and to tell me how much this movie means to him in his body of work, it's something that will never be replicated for me. Just the experience of making the movie, of growing incredibly close to Bruce, understanding him in ways I never could have understood him otherwise. The things how it's changed my life. It's funny, when the night before the Oscars with the film Crazy Heart, my first movie, I remember we were at an event where Elton John was playing for Jeff and a few people, and Jeff pulls me aside. The first time I'd ever been involved with anything like this. And Jeff said, "What happens tomorrow? None of that matters." He said, "What matters is the first day we met, making the movie, putting it together, and then seeing how it moves people." He said, "Tomorrow, don't even think about that." Of course, he won the Oscar, but
it's powerful. I mean, there's so much collaboration in the film. It's, of course, you and Bruce's extraordinary relationship, but frankly, it was pretty moving to see Bruce and Jon, and maybe like we've talked about Jeremy Allen White, maybe to talk about the other Jeremy Strong, who's incredible. What was it like to kind of dig into that relationship, and what it looks like to be supported by someone else?
Well, I mean, there's really no Bruce Springsteen without Jon Landau, because obviously we see that he saved his life. he was much more, and still is much more than just a manager. Part-time therapist, father figure, protector. He's the one who allows Bruce to take the big creative risks that he takes, and that he makes sure that those creative risks make it to us. When Bruce goes on stage, now they've been together for 50 years, Jon is the last person that he sees. And backstage, they put their foreheads together, don't say anything. And Bruce goes out to 100,000 people. And the first person that he sees when he comes off the stage is Jon Landau, hugging him. And, for someone who has made his life in creative endeavors, we would all be better off if we had somebody like Jon Landau, who completely lives in the shadows, but is devoted his entire life to another man's artistic creations, and was there for Bruce in ways that really no one else ever has been. And as Bruce has said, he saved Bruce's life, getting him into therapy, helping him through some of these incredibly hard times. And it's the central relationship in the film, and it's the true love story in the movie. Yeah. And it's rare to see that in cinema, where you have two men like that. I think being incredibly vulnerable and open and honest with one another. And I'm just thankful that they both let me tell that particular side of their story.
Springsteen is such a beloved figure and beloved by so many for so much. And, you've told a story that's never been told. You're also telling it in your way, your kind of movie. And I just to zoom out, just to ask you, what it's been like to share this story with such broad, audiences, people who are mega fans, people who are new audiences to Bruce, and maybe people who resonate with this kind of vulnerability and this kind of a film that can impact people.
Yeah, it has been challenging because Bruce is so beloved. And because Bruce means so much to so many people, and because I think people are conditioned to a certain type of music film, that when they see that this is not quite what they expected, maybe not quite what they wanted, it's hard. It's hard. Here's the good news. I've now taken the film all over the world, and this is probably the last Q&A session that I'll do, but I know that I suppose it's always better if a few people love your movie deeply than if a lot of people only mildly like it. That's what I'll say.
I think you're selling yourself short. This film has touched so many people and means a lot to so many people. So thank you so much, Scott, and congratulations.
Thank you, and thanks for coming out.
Thank you.